Hi there, guys. Today we're going to be talking about the E3 live letter from the producer, and just going to go over some of the questions and the responses that Yoshi P and the team gave. So just going to jump straight in because there's a lot to cover. The first question was, would you ever consider a slash hug emote? And and the response there was that a lot of players have wanted this, and that Yoshi personally wanted a slap emote. He said it is something that they're working on. Um, But it says there is always a problem with graphics overlays. Presumably, how do you have Lalafell hugging a Rodigan? Um, but it is something that they are planning and something that is coming. So next up was, have you thought about relic weapons for Disciples of the Land and Hand? And they were talking about relics in terms of, because obviously they have the class specific weapons, but they were talking more about sort of shiny, glowy weapons. And the answer was patch 2.3 is going to have desynthesis, and you can use these new items to craft new things. From there, we might bring relic weapons in a future patch where you make weapons from these new items. They said, this seriously, do people really want glowing pickaxes? And they made a joke about uh, a culinarian's pan with flames and fire and everything. Um, and so they said, next question was, what is the status for the future of the areas around Coerthas? Um, and Yoshi said that, as you know, at the end of the 1.0 story, the meteor wiped out everything. Said this heavily affected Coerthas, but he did say that front lines will have a close proximity to Mordon. It's going to be on the Cartanau fields, and you'll see the effects of the meteor firsthand. And as for Coerth, I said I'm sure people want to see it, and they said that it would probably be something in the expansion. In the last letter, you talked about a ridiculously hard battle that even devs couldn't beat. What was this battle? And he said what we were talking about was a harder mode of coil, an extreme coil, or a brutal coil. Um, and basically, they just talked about where they had originally envisaged the difficulty for the binding coil of Bahamut, and and they had originally conceived it of being an awful lot harder than it was, and said it's extremely punishing. It'll be similar to 11, where people would enter a fight with a debuff and die if they move before it goes away. And they said that's the sort of level of difficulty they want. They said it is a test to see if players worldwide would like this kind of content. Um, and they say it is mostly a status thing. The rewards would be the same as the current versions of Coil. Um, so there's nothing really to be gained. It is mostly just a status upgrade. But yeah, something interesting. I can't imagine a brutal version of Coil. You know, turn 5 is hard enough for most players. So it really would only be, the best of the best that are chasing this. And so they moved on to, I guess, what we'd all been waiting for, which was new jobs and classes. And they played a video um, showing the new job and new class, which is going to be, the job will be a ninja, and it will come from the class rogue. And they had spoken about how they kind of wanted something like a thief, but a thieves guild wouldn't necessarily work with the storyline. I mean, how would that fit in with having a guild in a city? No city in their right mind would want a thieves guild within it. Um, so yeah, they've gone this way, and it will be a DPS class. The the video showed dual wielding. They spoke a little bit about how it's dagger focused, dual wielding, but in the same way as a monk is technically dual wielding, it'll be two identical weapons, and it just takes up one slot. And they said the ninja will and the thief will also incorporate poisons onto their weapons, so different poisons for different different content, different situations. And they said that the ninjas are going to use the dual wielding and the poisons, but also um, sort of ninjutsu hand motions, which they called mudra. And they said that the mudra would be used in combination, so I guess similar to a monk. But they said that you can fail these. You can fail these mudras. Uh, so not quite sure how that's going to work out. But they said that positionally, it's not going to be quite as strict as a monk, um, but there will still be a certain level of it. But they wanted it to focus more on, uh, you know, using these mudras, these hand gestures, and things like that. Um, and they'd said that, with it being a DPS-based class, the people were asking for healers and tanks as well, and that they would probably be in the expansion. And they said they would speak more about that in the Fan Fest in October. The question was asked if we're going to get more fates like Odin and Behemoth, and the short answer was no, and the long answer was that with the hunting log, the hunting, the hunts that they've got planned for 2.3, there's going to be a lot of notorious monsters, which you'll be able to kill there. Um, Then they brought up a question which I've looked forward to: is can we get a minstrel's ballad version with the Imperial generals? And they brought up FanFest again, and they said it was something that they were thinking of around that time, but then they came up with something even better. Um, so not sure what that's going to be. But they said they did like the idea of fighting the generals, and it is something that they may go back to in the future. And they asked then about personal housing, of course, and they said that in 2.3 we're introducing free company personal rooms. Personal housing's not gone away; it's still on the agenda, and they said they definitely want it out before 2.4, but they specifically mentioned 2.38, so probably a few months yet. They asked about the E3 trailer, which they showed with the different primals, and they asked if it was Shiva. Um, and they joked about Shiva being a not being a motorcycle in this version. And they basically said that with 2.3 coming, they wanted to use Ramu, but the marketing team basically said, um, you know, Shiva's an easier sell, being female and scantily clad than an old guy with a beard in Ramu. Um, and then they asked if there was going to be more eight-man dungeons, specifically dungeons and not raids like Coil or trials like the primals. And it was an interesting answer, really, because they'd said that Yoshi said we realise that people want different things around the world, and each community has different style of content that they like. And they said some people wanted more four-man dungeons, some people wanted more eight-man dungeons, and they also said that people wanted solo dungeons to be able to go in and do these solo. And I don't know if that means going back to original dungeons like Sastasha or Tamtara, and without level syncing and being able to solo them, or if it be new dungeon sort of instances specifically that were solo. Um, but they said they want to accommodate as many people as they can, but they have to prioritize the way that they're going to do it. And so they had said that the primary focus at the moment was on four-man dungeon content. Then, interestingly, they said that the focus was solo dungeon content, and that finally the focus would be eight-man dungeon content after that. So that was quite interesting. Now, they brought up a question about free companies and said for people that are in larger 200 person plus free companies, will there be content where they can all group together? And a very sensible answer, in my opinion, from Yoshi was that, while there are free companies that have 200 plus members, there are some who've only got 4 or 5 who are just, real life friends that play together. And they said that if we focus on making content for big free companies like that, then that would leave the smaller free companies without content that they can't take part in. So as a middle ground, they said they were talking about implementing a quest log kind of thing where free companies can tackle large scale quests. Um, in terms of dates for that, they were looking at around 2.4. And to be honest, it sounds a bit like the idea that they have in Star Trek Online, where there's projects that guilds work towards, which sounds like a good idea to me. Um, and so they'd asked then about, will we get unique stat weapons and armor, which they had to clear up, and they mentioned things like weapons that would have, say, things like a increased duration for shield bash, etc. And Yoshi had said that they worry that with content like that, and weapons like that, it can almost become a requirement for certain content, and that it makes planning future content more difficult because they have to assume that people will have these weapons and will use them. And they said that they realise that players want this, and they are discussing it. But they do obviously have to worry about the balance of the game. So it's something they'll think about, but it's not something that's planned in the near future. Um, then there was a question about airships and how it had been discussed that airships could be built for free companies and how would that work. And they showed a screenshot of a lab in well, it didn't look so much like a basement uh, as the basements are in the existing houses at the moment. It looked more like a sort of add-on to the basement because it was so much larger than the basement. The screenshot they showed had a person for scale, and it was enormous. And so yeah, it looked an awful lot bigger than the current basements. But they said it is something that is still planned, and they'd said that they'd been asked how on earth do you get an airship out of the basement, and they'd basically said magic was kind of what they've gone for in terms of excuses. They're basically going to shrink the airship so that it fits in this sort of lab that you're building it in, and then when it goes outside, it would magically get bigger. Um, so okay, sounds odd to me, but you never know. It might work. I'm sure they'll come up with a good story way to explain it. They have so far. They mentioned one of the questions: what happened to the concept of roaming primals that were available for free companies to capture and use? And they said it's not gone away, but they wanted to try and work in a good story reason for why primals would be just roaming the landscape. And until they've got that, it's not something that they're going to implement. And then one of the more controversial questions about the status of the marriage system, and they said their plan is to have this ready for about 2.4, and they said that players will be able to pledge their love or friendship in a ceremony that demonstrates this eternal bond. And the controversial part is that they've said there will be no gender or race limitations. So, to male, to female, a row, and a lala, it doesn't matter. Um, it's not so much marriage as it will be an, eternal bond ceremony. Um, but yeah, they basically said that there won't be any restrictions on who can use it. And they had mentioned uh, a a married mount base, yeah, a married mount, and specific things that would be available for people who had pledged their allegiance in this way, which I guess might have been a two-person chocobo they showed in the last live letter. And then they asked if there'd ever be one-on-one PvP, like I guess dueling in other MMOs. And they said it's not something they're thinking about because they can't really find a way to make it fun. But they did understand that people want to be able to try out their DPS and check it out and see how that works in PvP. And they're going to try and figure out a way to implement that, whether that would be because, or with the striking dummies at the PvP pier, or through a 1v1 thing. But it is something for the future. The question was asked, will future Relic upgrades have further visual updates, like a sort of recolor or a reskin? And they'd said that after Novus, they had planned to change the weapon's look. And after that upgrade, beyond sort of two upgrades ahead, then they want to have eventually a weapon that was sort of Excalibur-esque. Like a legendary weapon, an exact replica that the Warriors of Light had used in the past. So that'd be interesting. I'm not that I'm tired of the way that the Holy Shield and sword look on a paladin. Just it's been the same for a while now, and I know we have glamours that we can change it with, but it'd be nice just to have that, an option on how you can make it look different. So he said, once you've beaten all the extreme primals and got their weapons, what is the point of keeping the tokens? They're basically useless after you've collected all of the weapons. And is there any plans to make them be able to be exchanged for something else? And they'd said that they don't have any plans, at the moment. They are bringing out more primals, but they had said basically, if you've got them, you can just get rid of them. It's fine. And then the question, which I think Yoshi knew was coming, but wasn't looking forward to. When can we use the Chocobo while we're queued for a solo duty? And I think the answer that Yoshi gave in Japanese, but this is basically a giant pain in the backside. Because the Chocobo becomes a party member rather than, a companion, then it makes it difficult to queue for instances. And they realise that it is something that they're going to have to implement at some point, but they would rather focus on adding new content at the moment than fixing this, as it would be quite a big job. So it's fair enough, it's not that much of an issue. Personally, I'd like a warning screen so that if you're queued for the duty finder and you click to bring out your chocobo, you use the Gishel greens. I would like a warning to say this will remove you from the duty finder queue, rather than just it bumping you out completely. But hey ho. And then the last couple of questions: would there be an opportunity to save different HUDs? For example, a DPS HUD, a healer HUD, and a tank HUD. And they said system-wise it's definitely possible, and it's on the task list for the UI team, but it is difficult to implement. But they realise that it fits well with the system they have to change, for one character to do all these different jobs, and it's something looking into, but no dates or even an idea of release dates. And that was about it. They will have more reveals in part 2 of the live letter, which is going to be Thursday. But it will be in Japanese, and it will need to be translated. So we'll see how we get on with that. Hope this has been of some use to you. And obviously, remember you can subscribe to my channel for more Final Fantasy and WildStar based videos. And you can follow me on Twitch and also on Twitter. And those links are in the description down below. So thank you very much for listening in. And I'll see you next time.